Voters in the 4th Congressional District will elect a new member of Congress this year. This is the seat currently held by Joe Kennedy. He is running for Senate against Ed Markey. The 4th District stretches from Brookline to Fall River. It includes 34 cities and towns and nearly 730,000 people. There are 9 Democrats and 2 Republicans running for the seat. And throughout the month, John Keller will be introducing you to all of the candidates in this crowded field.
Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's start with the basic question. Who are you and why are you running for Congress?
Great. First, I want to say thank you so much for the time. I very much appreciate to do this. So, who am I? So I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I put in 30 years of active duty time. I started off at the very lowest rank, enlisted, and made it all the way up to colonel. So that in itself says a little bit about me. It was a very challenging thing to do at the time that I went in, especially to be a female. So I'm a very, very determined individual. And when you rise to the ranks of that much, you have to perform probably a little bit harder, over 100%, always, because of course, being a female in a predominantly male environment, that's what it takes. So I am a hard charger. I came from a family, I grew up in Walpole, and I came from a family of 7 brothers and sisters, where my dad worked 2 jobs to take care of us, and my mother also worked. She worked as a nurse. I paid my own way to Massasoit Community College. I went to community college right here in Massachusetts. And after that, I went in the military. I finished getting my degree in the military. I was a psych tech or behavioral health specialist for a while in the military. I got to see a lot of Vietnam veterans. It's very, very interesting. And then after 6.5 years, when I did become an officer, I spent the rest of those years as a hospital administrator, which also is going to be very helpful because I was an administrator in the largest socialized medical system in the world. 100% taxpayer paid, socialized, if you want to say the word socialized, and I don't like to use that word, but 100% taxpayer paid system. So I very much am familiar with how that works. And so I think I'm going to bring a lot to the table that way.
Okay, Julie, if you're elected,
yes,
what will be your first choice of House committee assignment? And what would be the first bill you'd want to put your name to?
Sure. I've actually thought about some of these things. One of the things in particular that I am looking at, one of the bills, is I am a huge advocate for veterans. I was appointed to the Governor's Advisory Council right here in the Commonwealth for Veterans Affairs, and I was an Outstanding Veteran of the Year. So I do a lot with veterans here in the Commonwealth. There is some legislation right now on the table to help veterans with cannabis. And I know that is a very progressive standpoint for a Republican to take. But again, given the background I just told you I was in, health and medicine, I firmly believe that our veterans can find relief. I'm associated with a gentleman in Washington, D.C. already, part of what's called the Veterans Cannabis Project. And there is legislation that I would get on board with right now, where they're trying to push through to have the Veterans Administration not only do research, but at the very minimum, allow the veteran providers to have conversations, at least have conversations with their beneficiaries about that. So that's probably the first I look at in terms of that. And then there's also right now a $120 billion restaurant bill that's being proposed. Another thing I'm interested in is getting the economy back on track. So that is something else that I'd be looking at.
How about a committee preference?
Committee preference, I'd like to go on healthcare.
Yeah.
I definitely would like to go healthcare. Healthcare is definitely, because I understand it to such a detail, being a hospital administrator, I understand I actually was a co-author of a resource allocation of healthcare, meaning every little last bit of dollars and cents that it goes into a healthcare visit. And I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into making a healthcare visit. You have to understand that in order to fix, because you can't, it's very complex. So I would like to be on that. I think I'd be very valuable there.
It's been 15 years since Congress has done a BRAC round, base realignment and closure, which is the device that we use to periodically assess military spending, make cuts, reconsolidations, whatever. There's a lot of talk that there might be another BRAC round in the next Congress. And while the 4th District doesn't have large military bases, many residents do make their living from that very important sector here in Massachusetts, military research and defense.
Yes.
If you are in Congress when there's the next BRAC round, could you ever see yourself voting to approve closures that would cost jobs in the 4th District?
I'm going to say right off the bat, I have actually been involved in these. I was up at Hanscom Air Force Base when they actively were going through BRAC. I've actually been at several bases when they were actively going through BRAC. And it is extremely sensitive. I agree with you 100%. You know, you have to look at it. It does take away some jobs. It does affect. You try very, very hard to preserve those jobs. You try very, very hard, but you can't also take the stance that if it's not the right thing to do, it's not the right thing to do. So you try to preserve those jobs the best you can. When I was at Hanscom Air Force Base, I know that there were certain things that we wanted to preserve. So what you do is you try to preserve those jobs and those services that you think are going to be the best for both. If the Department of Defense needs them, fine. You keep those civilians there too. What I've seen happen, and I love the idea, is the partnerships, the joint basing. I love that. And you've seen it happen at Pease, you've seen it happen at Hanscom, where we can share between the military and the civilian, and we can bring market forces, new technologies in, and share those things together. I love it.
There's been a lot of talk lately about defunding the police. Do you support that?
I do not, absolutely do not support that. I support more funding to the police, and I'll tell you why. I have had many discussions with my local police and with some of the larger police organizations. One of the things they talk about a lot is they have wanted to have social workers and caseworkers as part of their team. We have something locally here called problem-oriented policing, PUP teams. And what's been missing from those teams are those caseworkers and those social workers. That would complement the team wonderfully. The difficulty is going to be, and I've heard people say this, I'm going to put social workers out there first. If you go to a domestic, I can tell you, the first thing you're going to run into is one or the other of those spouses is going to have a weapon. I can almost guarantee you that. If I'm that social worker, I'm not going to want to be the first one that opens that door. That's very, very dangerous. I think that people have not thought this through. So I think it's the wrong move to make. I'm for law and order. We need to have law and order in order for us to move forward as a society. I firmly believe that.
And you can find interviews with all of the candidates on our website, cbsboston.com. Stay with CBSN Boston and WBZ TV for campaign 2020 coverage. The state primary is Tuesday, September 1st. Vote by mail applications are due by August 26.